feel that? What is that?
It's the power trying to come back on.
Okay, so here's the Jurassic demo. This is a 1992
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Dell Performance 46D50 PC, and I'm going to tell the story about it in more detail while booting up different operating systems, because basically sometimes this is going to be slow. I've got 8 different operating systems all on this one machine, and with a little craftiness I can get them all to boot up on this one machine. So obviously, maybe not quite so obviously, this is Windows 95, and I guess the main thing I want to do here before shutting it down is demonstrate that it can get on the internet. And so I'm going to bring up Mosaic, and here we are at the home of Mosaic Communications before they became Netscape, before the Netscape browser was released, but they were starting to advertise things. So anyway, so here we are on the World Wide Web with Mosaic, and now I'm going to
I can't get Jurassic Park back online.
shut down the computer, and the operating systems and the BIOS get confused sometimes, so it's usually safest to press the reboot button to reboot things. And there's various tricks I'm going to use along the way for the multi-booting, but mostly it's going to depend on Dell Unix and Microsoft tricks. Okay, so let's hope we boot okay. Yeah, we're booting okay. So just check the SCSI disk, the diskette. Now it's checking the SCSI. So it's ready to boot Dell Unix, but here we're going to go to partition 1 where Windows is, and then we're going to say Windows, and then we're going to say go back to Windows for Workgroups. So here we are booting DOS to run Windows for Workgroups, and eventually we're going to get this going and have it booting Windows for Workgroups and showing Mosaic on that as well. So here we go. Here's Windows for Workgroups. Clunky old interface coming up. Jurassic Park monitor screen, and pretty soon it'll let me give me a password. Yep. Okay. So, and now we're going to open up trusty old file manager and run that same Mosaic again. So here we are back at Mosaic Communications. So we're going to shut this down. Yes, we really do want to end the Windows session. So now we're back in DOS. And to complete the scenario, we're going to jump all the way forward to Windows 99. All these operating systems, Windows 2000s, all these operating systems were released before the year 2000. Windows 2000 was released December 1999, and it's the newest of the ones here. And so we're going to boot it, and we're going to, okay, so this is pathetically slow. And so I'm going to talk a little bit while we're waiting for it. I'm assuming all these things are going to work. There's no guarantee there is. So so this chassis looks very much like the JAWS prototype that I'm so fond of, that I got to use with Andy Grove at the 1991 Comdex. And this is show and tell version of the JAWS board that was in that machine. And so this is the processor end, and this is the video memory end, basically. And what was special about that card at the time was using the processor to directly manipulate the video memory, not going through the ISA bus or even the ESA bus. That machine is working pretty well, actually. It's right over here to my left, but you know, I've been nervous about it not working for a long time, and every now and then I'll think, oh no, it's not going to work anymore, but I figure out ways to make it work. But I've also been accumulating as many spare parts for it as I can to make the equivalent, and I accumulated almost enough spare parts to make a duplicate of it, with the one exception that this is the standard processor card that doesn't have the video memory on it. So this is the same thing, except it doesn't have the video memory, and that socket is supposed to be for a full 50 megahertz 486, and I've got one of those back here somewhere. Yeah. So here's the 486 50 megahertz. Here's the processor card. Here's the system board. So this is where the processor card plugs in. This is an ESA board, and so there's 6 ESA slots. This is a daughter board that's got a VGA chip on it, and nothing else too terribly exciting there. But anyway, but this is, in principle, a working system board that I haven't actually tried yet. One of these days I'm actually going to try to put all these parts together and make them work. And over down here on the floor I've got the power supply, a spare power supply. So in principle I've gotten up to 3 machines like this, with the ESA board and this one here that I'm actually showing here with an ISA bus. And you notice we're still waiting on Windows 2000 to do, so I'm taking my time here, but I would like to get this back in the bag. Okay, sometimes the mouse doesn't get initialized right, and I was worried about that, but that seems to be okay. Anyway, so this machine has the same chassis, same power supply, etc. And I saw it on eBay in early July, I guess it was, and the seller was asking too much for it and didn't know if it worked. But in fact, the seller didn't think it did work. But I thought to myself, well, if I can get this for under $100, I can use it for spare parts. I haven't bothered to configure any accounts besides administrator on Windows 2000. So anyway, Windows 2000 is still going to take a couple minutes to be ready. Anyway, they didn't think it worked. I thought I was going to get it for spare parts. Ones of these that are in nominally perfect condition go for, I think, about $500 on eBay. I recently saw one that was going for $1,000, but I don't think the seller got anything like that for that one. Anyway, so I got this machine for $99.99, including shipping, and I thought, well, I'm going to try to see if I can make it work. And I kept filling with it and realizing that I could probably do a whole lot of things with it. And so I got the ambition of showing all sorts of different operating systems on it. And so we're almost ready, I think, to run Mosaic here. Let's see. So I think we're about to bring up Mosaic here. And so it's taken, you know, lots of fooling with disk drives, lots of fooling with Ethernet cards, etc. But I did get it to work at least yesterday, and I thought it was time to try to make a video. So here we are making the video, and I'm still waiting for Windows 2000. The machine came with 16 megs of memory. I got 32 megs of it, which, you know, still seems pathetically small. My niece just put 24 gigs of memory in her gaming desktop, and that seemed a little excessive, but not ridiculous these days. So anyway, I think Mosaic is still coming up from the flashing disk light. One of the problems of getting 8 operating systems on here is most of the operating systems want their own primary partition, and the PC architecture originally only allowed for 4 primary partitions, or 3 primary and 1 extended partition. And if that extended partition, I'm assuming Mosaic's coming up still, but could be wrong. We could even try to use Task Manager to tell us. Let's see. Task Manager tell us. Anyway, this machine doesn't like having only 32 megs of memory for Windows 2000. Everything else does pretty well in 32 megs of memory. But let's see. So here we have, yep, here's Mosaic coming up. I'm just being impatient. No. Oh no, this is ridiculous. We don't want this. Okay, here we are. Finally. So here we are looking up Mosaic Communications, and we finally got to where I wanted to get. So that's really all I wanted to show about Windows 2000, just that we can bring up Mosaic. So to recap so far, we've got Windows 95 running Mosaic, Windows for Workgroups 3.11 running Mosaic, and now Windows 2000. So we're going to go back and reboot again to get to operating system number 4, which will be Dell Unix, just for the fun of it. So, anyway, as I was saying, the architecture allows for 4 operating systems on a disk. I've managed to get 6 operating systems through trickery on the primary disk, and then have a secondary disk which has 2 more operating systems on it. And I'm planning on writing a blog post that goes into more detail about all this. So for now, we'll just leave it at that, unless I get bored waiting for things to boot again. But so far, so good. This was what I expected to be the longest boot process, and I think we're hearing the speakers not like Windows 2000, so I'm going to turn down the volume. And sometimes the configuration memory that's battery backed and gets messed up by these operating systems, and I'll have to reset it. But let's hope that doesn't happen this time. So this is part 2 of the Jurassic computer tour. I made it all the way through all 8 operating systems, and then was dismayed to discover that the camera had stopped because it hit the 4 gig limit on a video file. I'm shooting this at HD so that the screens can be as clear as possible, and the camera doesn't compress very well, so it's a 6-year-old camera or something. Anyway, so it stopped while Dell Unix was booting, so I'm going back to booting Dell Unix, and I wish I hadn't done those keystrokes, made it more trouble than it needed to be. Anyway, so we're back to booting Dell Unix, and I hope I can remember anything worth saying that I said the first time through. So we've done 3 operating systems. Dell Unix is going to be number 4. Next step will be 5. Red Hat Linux 5.2 will be 6. And then OS2 3.0 will be number 7, and we'll end up with OpenBSD 2.5. Most of this is done with binaries. I actually have the source for Dell Unix, so this is the last version of Dell Unix from 1993, built from source, and I built Mosaic from source for this. And next step, of course, I had to build Tim Berners-Lee World Wide Web app from source, but otherwise I think everything else I'm doing with binaries. It took 6 partitions for the 6 operating systems. On this disk, I think if things just go right, it's going to start X and then start Mosaic. Anyway, so so Windows got the first primary partition and 1 partition out of the extended partition. Next Step got the 2nd partition. Dell Unix got the 3rd partition, and then Red Hat uses a swap partition and a root partition out of the Okay, so this should be bringing up that same Mosaic Communications page about Netscape, which it does. And so we're going to get out of here, and we're going to press the reset button to get Dell Unix to shut down. So, so Dell Unix will take a minute or 2 to shut down, and then we'll start the next step. So, so part of how this all started was me realizing that I could make Next Step run on the JAWS machine, which I did, and then get Tim's browser to work on Next Step on the JAWS machine, which I did. And so I did that originally on the JAWS machine, but I'm doing the same thing here at slightly lower resolution on this. This is a Sang ET4000 video card. The original video card in here was flaky, so I added the Sang. And so Next Step is running at 1024 by 768 on this. Next Step runs 1152 by 864 on JAWS, but otherwise it's pretty much the same visual experience. In principle, on JAWS it's faster. This and the JAWS machine both have the same DX250 processor, 25 megahertz bus, clock doubled to 50 megahertz. The original JAWS demo with Andy Grove had a true 50 megahertz prototype card in it, and so I'm still, but I don't have any hopes for actually getting that working. You can probably get a plain 50 megahertz card working with the same VGA when I get that other system working, assuming I do. But anyway, Next Step is almost up to life, and it will give us a login prompt, and then we'll navigate where Tim's browser is. Tim's browser uses his original HTTP protocol. Modern web servers won't support that. So just to show that this can get to a different machine, it's going to go to a Fedora Linux machine that's still running something that this browser works with. Okay, so it says startup is complete. Mouse is okay. So now, so this is the Next Step desktop as it looks like, and in a minute we'll browse to the binary of, I don't know why it's saying that, but I don't care. And so here's where we got the browser. So here's the World Wide Web app. We actually call, well, Next actually called them apps, which, so I suspect that's the first instance of. So here's the original page from Tim's, but this is off the local file system, so that doesn't prove that the browser is getting anywhere, but here I'm going to give it the address of this is a machine just behind me. And now we say hello world from Fedora. So that is Tim's browser getting to Apache on the Fedora machine behind me. So that's all for this. I'm going to assume that I can edit out all that waiting. So now, next step is going to be, no pun intended, to boot Red Hat Linux. So this is the first time I have to do something weird in the multi-boot process. Have it to start it up off the diskette. In principle, I should have been able to get Linux to use the master boot record and use either Lilo or Grub to get to a partition. Next step messed up the configuration memories. We're going to have to fix that. But anyways, I should have been able to use Lilo or Grub to get to the extended partition without the diskette, but I never could get that to work, so I just decided I would make it work with the diskette. And so now, yeah, so next step, didn't like the date, so we're going to besides not liking the date, next step seems to have a year 2K problem. If I have the date set too far in the future, it fails. If I have the date pretty much anything besides the dates at once, it'll do something weird. But anyway, that can be lived with. But so while this is booting, I'm going to see how we're doing on time. So I think we've got enough time on this video file for Red Hat, but I'm going to have to pause before I do the last two operating systems. But let's see how that goes. Yesterday I got all confused with that configuration memory screen, the one that next step messed up. And I had set the diskette parameters wrong. I said it was a 720 meg instead of a 1.44, and got all confused and ended up reinstalling Linux a bunch of times, and then having trouble with the Ethernet card. This machine's got 3 different Ethernet cards in it. Dell Unix only likes the Western Digital. That's the only one it supports. Red Hat only supports, as far as I can get it to work, and Intel Ether Express. I'm also using that for Windows 95 and for Windows for Workgroup. We don't need to hear this. So Windows 2000 requires a 3C509 3COM card and OpenBSD, I forget what it's using, and OS2 is using the Ether Express. luck, we'll get this done before the end of the memory card, and then I will start another segment for the last two operating systems. So this is going to be Netscape 3, I think. Actually, it will be called Communicator. It includes mail and news group stuff. I think this was the first time that Netscape had a mail app as part of their primary offering. Okay, so we're starting up Netscape Communicator, and all this other stuff starting up too. And it's going to show a Red Hat Linux page, I think, first, and then we'll have to type in the URI to get to the outside world. Let's see if that's true. What else is worth saying? You know, the frustrations with the different versions. I mean, I tried so many different versions of Red Hat that all should have worked. I tried so many different versions of it. Windows that all should have worked. Okay, so there we are at the Netscape page. I'm going to shut down here and restart the camera. So this is the third segment. At the end of the second segment was shutting down Red Hat, which was operating system number 6, and that was the last one off the primary drive. To trick things to work with the SCSI drive, basically tell BIOS that the IDE drive is not there, and then reboot, and we should come up in OS2 Warp. And then from OS2 Warp, we'll go on to OpenBSD. So I wanted to run Warp 4.52, I think is the last version that IBM put out themselves. I mean, there are other people that still work on OS2, it's amazing, but 4.52 is the last version from IBM, I think. But I couldn't get 4.52 to work, I couldn't get 4.0 to work. But here's 3.0, and it seems to be okay. And it has its own browser built into it, which I wasn't very impressed with, so I'm using the Windows version of Mosaic on this. And for some reason, I couldn't get the PS2 mouse to work with either OS2 or with OpenBSD, but fortunately I had a serial mouse, so this is a serial mouse connected through one of the RS-232 ports, and hopefully all will be well in just a minute. So I think it's going to remember that I had Mosaic running before and bring it up, but let's see. Okay, so there's a clock symbol, there's sort of the main menu, there's a command prompt that I used to run fdisk the last time, and I think it's going to bring up Mosaic all by itself, but let's see if it does. If it doesn't, I'll start Mosaic. Okay, there's Mosaic. And Mosaic Communications, welcome to Netscape. So now we're going to tell F disk. So we want to make the BSD partition the bootable, active, and the okay. So we've made that bootable. We're going to save and exit. We're going to shut it down. Yes, we really do want to shut down. Okay, so we're almost done. And so last restart should come up with OpenBSD, should start X Windows, and then some flavor of Netscape binary that I found that works on BSD is what I'll be running. I could have built Mosaic, I assume, but since I found the Netscape binary, that seemed good enough. Don't remember, I think it's 2 point something, but I'm not sure. So anyway, okay, so now this is normal BSD boot stuff, and looking at the hard disk, looking at various devices, still looking at devices, now the CD drive. It would have been a whole lot easier to do some of this stuff if back then these machines supported booting from CDs, but they didn't. This is a SCSI CD actually, off the SCSI controller. AT-API CDs were several years after this machine. BSD doesn't like the date, so I think it set it forward to 2002 sometime. Started the network. Various daemons. Anyway, so, lots of things meant manipulating diskettes. I don't want to talk about how many diskettes I had to deal with. Fortunately, I had some new ones and lots of old ones that I could reformat. So here we are starting up X, and I think it's going to bring up Mosaic all by itself. And so here's the initial X screen, the mouse is working, and I think I'm going to have to tell Netscape to go to that URI, but otherwise we're about done. So clock, and various other interesting windows, but the real one we're still waiting on, and waiting. Okay, so here we are with Netscape 3.0, and already had the URI set there. So here we are, we're all done. Hooray, made it through the second time. So the first time made it through from start to finish with no interruptions except for the camera. This time went through the camera troubles, and hopefully we've got 3 videos that I can patch together and make something interesting. So anyway, I hope that you found this at least interesting, if not entertaining, and there'll be a blog post to go along with it. But that's all for now. Thanks.